Dogs don't dig through solid ice for no reason. That was the first thing Sheriff Dale said before the whole town realized someone was still alive beneath Blackwater Lake. The barking started a little after 2 a.m. sharp. Violent. Desperate. At first, people ignored it. In northern Alaska, dogs barked at everything. Snowstorms. Moose. Shadows moving through pine trees. But this was different. The white Malamute stood alone in the middle of the frozen lake during a blizzard, clawing at the ice like its life depended on it. Maybe someone else's did. I wasn't there when they found the dog. I was under the ice. And by that point, I'd already started saying goodbye to myself. 6 hours earlier, I had been driving across Blackwater Lake with a camera strapped to my back and a half-empty thermos of coffee rattling in the storage box behind my snowmobile. The northern lights had finally appeared after 3 straight weeks of cloud cover, and every wildlife photographer within 200 miles had been chasing them, including me. The sky looked unreal that night. Green ribbons twisting across the darkness like something alive. Beautiful enough to make you forget how dangerous Alaska could be. That was the problem with beauty. It distracted you right before things fell apart. My name is Ethan Carter, 34 years old. Divorced 3 weeks ago. Professional wildlife photographer, though lately that title felt generous considering how little work I'd been getting. My ex-wife used to joke that I loved frozen landscapes more than people. Turns out she wasn't joking. Her final text message still sat unread on my phone inside my jacket pocket while I crossed the lake that night. I already knew what it said anyway. Something polite. Final. Empty. 12 years together reduced to legal paperwork and awkward silence. Funny how your whole life can collapse without making a sound. The snowmobile headlights cut across the ice while heavy wind shoved powder across the surface in silver waves. Visibility maybe 30 feet at best. The smart thing would have been turning around. Going home. But home was just a dark cabin with unpaid bills and one side of the closet suddenly empty. So I kept driving. Faster than I should have. The cold bit through every layer I wore. Even with thermal gloves, my fingers ached against the handlebars. Minus 15 degrees outside. Wind chill worse. Alaska didn't care if your heart was broken. It just kept freezing everything equally. Then Ghost appeared. At the time, I didn't know his name. I just saw a large white shape running alongside the tree line near the edge of the lake. A dog. Big one. Thick fur glowing pale beneath the moonlight. He moved fast, almost pacing my snowmobile. I remember laughing to myself. You lost out here, buddy? The dog stopped suddenly, stared directly at me, and started barking. Not playful barking. Warning barking. Sharp. Aggressive. The kind that raises the hair on the back of your neck before your brain understands why. I slowed the snowmobile slightly. The dog barked again. Louder this time. Then the ice beneath me cracked. The sound exploded through the lake like a rifle shot. My stomach dropped instantly. Every survival instinct I had kicked in at once. I shifted my weight backward, trying not to panic, trying not to accelerate too hard. Blackwater Lake froze thick during winter, usually over 2 feet deep with ice. Usually. But moving water underneath could create weak spots. Pockets thin enough to kill you. Another crack shot beneath the machine. Longer this time. Spiderweb fractures spread under the headlights. No, no, no. The entire lake collapsed beneath me. 1 second, I was gripping the handlebars. The next, freezing black water swallowed me whole. The cold hit like a car crash. Violent. Crushing. Absolute. I couldn't breathe. My body locked instantly as darkness closed over my head, and the snowmobile dragged me deeper beneath the ice. Somewhere above me, muffled by snow and frozen water, I heard the dog barking like the world was ending. People think freezing to death feels painful. It does at first. Then your body starts shutting doors you did not even know existed. The water crushed the air out of my lungs the second I went under. One instant I was gasping in the open night air. The next, everything became black chaos and silence. My snowmobile dragged me downward for maybe 3 or 4 feet before the machine twisted sideways and slammed against the underside of the ice. The impact ripped my hands free from the handlebars. I remember spinning underwater, completely disoriented, unable to tell which direction was up anymore. That was the terrifying part. Not the cold. Not the darkness. The confusion. Ice above me looked exactly like the black water below me. My body panicked instantly. I kicked hard, my boots striking solid ice instead of open air. Relief hit me for half a second. Up. I found up. Then terror replaced it just as quickly because there was no hole left. The lake had already sealed itself behind me with floating chunks of broken ice. My chest burned. I slammed both fists against the frozen surface overhead, searching desperately along the cracks for any opening wide enough to breathe through. Nothing. Just solid ice stretching endlessly in every direction. My gloves scraped across rough, frozen ridges while my heartbeat thundered inside my skull. I needed to stay calm. That was survival rule number 1 in freezing water. Panic kills faster than cold. I knew that. I had photographed enough search and rescue operations over the years to know exactly what hypothermia could do to a person, usually within minutes. The problem was knowledge becomes useless when your body thinks it is dying. My lungs convulsed violently. Every instinct screamed at me to inhale, even though I knew breathing underwater would end everything immediately. I pushed away from the ice and tried swimming toward where I thought the shoreline might be, but the heavy winter gear slowed me down like concrete tied around my body. My jacket filled with icy water. My camera bag dragged at my shoulder. Even my boots felt heavier with every kick. Then I heard it again. Barking. Muffled through the ice above me. Sharp. Constant. The dog. Somehow he was still there. The sound cut through the darkness like a lifeline. I followed it blindly, pulling myself through freezing black water while my flashlight beam shook violently across the underside of the lake. My fingers were already going numb. That happened faster than I expected. Pain first, then burning, then almost nothing at all. Dangerous nothing. I reached the area beneath the barking and slammed both palms against the ice as hard as I could. Once, twice, again. A dull thud echoed through the frozen surface. The dog barked louder immediately. He heard me. Oh God, he actually heard me. Hope can be a brutal thing. The second it appears, fear gets worse because now you have something to lose again. I kept pounding against the ice while tiny air bubbles escaped my mouth and floated upward around my face. My vision blurred at the edges. Black spots drifted across the darkness. I needed air soon. Real air. Not another 30 seconds. Not another minute. Now. Then I saw movement above me. A pale shape crossing over the snow-covered surface. The dog running back and forth directly over my head. Digging. I could actually hear the scratching now. Claws scraping ice. Faster. Faster. He was trying to reach me. I almost laughed underwater because the idea was impossible. No dog could dig through 2 feet of frozen lake ice during a blizzard. But he kept trying anyway. My chest spasmed violently. My body forced a tiny gasp from me before I could stop it. Freezing water rushed into my mouth. Panic exploded through me instantly. I shoved upward against the ice with everything I had left, but my arms suddenly felt weak. Slow. Heavy. The cold was winning. I could feel it happening piece by piece. My fingers stopped responding correctly. My legs cramped painfully beneath me. Even my thoughts started drifting strangely, random memories flashing through my mind without warning. Emily laughing in our kitchen 6 summers ago. My father teaching me to fish when I was 10. The smell of pine wood smoke from the cabin fireplace. Hypothermia. Confusion stage. I recognized the signs immediately, which somehow made it worse. Above me, the barking suddenly grew frantic. Then another sound joined it. Human voices. Distant at first. Yelling through the wind. The dog had found someone. The strange thing about dying is how quiet it feels near the end. Not peaceful. Just distant. Like the world slowly stepping away from you one sound at a time. The barking above me faded in and out while freezing water dragged at my body like invisible hands trying to pull me deeper beneath the lake. I kicked upward again, weaker this time, my gloves sliding uselessly across the ice overhead. My flashlight beam dimmed with every passing second. The cold had reached inside me now. Not just my skin. My thoughts. My memories. My heartbeat felt slow and heavy inside my chest. Somewhere above me, voices shouted through the storm. I could not make out words anymore. Only noise distorted by thick ice and water. Then came the sound of scratching directly overhead again. Fast. Relentless. The dog was still digging. I remember thinking how impossible that was. Any normal animal would have run for shelter hours ago. Wind gusts shook snow across the lake's surface hard enough to erase footprints within seconds. Temperatures had dropped below -20 by then. Yet somehow that dog refused to leave. I pressed one numb hand against the ice above me. My movements felt delayed now, like my body belonged to someone else. The survival instructor I photographed once during a Denali expedition had warned me about this exact stage. He called it the comfort lie. Your body gets so cold that exhaustion starts feeling warm. Sleep starts sounding reasonable. That terrified me more than the water itself. I knew if I stopped moving, I would not start again. So I kept fighting. Barely. My vision blurred again. For a moment, I actually saw Emily standing above the lake instead of rescuers. Her dark hair blowing in the wind. Her old green winter coat. The same one she wore during our first trip to Alaska together almost 10 years ago. You are always chasing storms, Ethan, she used to tell me. Back then she would laugh after saying it. Toward the end, she just sounded tired. Another memory hit me suddenly. Our kitchen in Seattle. Rain against the windows. Her wedding ring sitting alone on the counter between us while neither of us spoke for almost 5 straight minutes. Funny how silence can destroy things faster than screaming ever could. My lungs convulsed violently again. Pain exploded through my chest as another small breath of icy water slipped into my mouth. Instinct took over immediately. Panic surged through me harder than before. I slammed both fists upward against the ice. Once, twice, again. Then suddenly, a crack answered back. Tiny, sharp, but real. Hope surged through me so fast it almost hurt. Above me, the barking turned wild. Human voices shouted louder now. Running footsteps crossed overhead. Someone yelled, "I hear him." Another crack split across the frozen surface directly above my head. Light appeared for half a second through the fractured ice. Weak moonlight. Beautiful. I pushed upward with everything I had left inside me. My shoulders screamed from exhaustion. My arms barely responded anymore. But the crack widened slightly beneath my gloves. I heard metal striking ice somewhere overhead. Axes maybe. Rescue tools. The people above me were digging now too. The dog barked nonstop through all of it. Closer than ever. Then I saw him. Just briefly through the fractured ice. White fur. Snow-covered muzzle. Pale blue eyes staring directly down at me through the cracks. The dog froze for 1 second when our eyes met. Almost like he recognized me. Then he started digging even harder. Blood stained the snow around his paws now, but he ignored it completely. I tried to push upward again. My muscles failed instantly. Nothing happened. Fear rushed through me so suddenly that tears burned behind my eyes, even in the freezing water. I had come this far. They were right there. I could hear them, hear life above me, but my body was shutting down too fast. The edges of my vision darkened completely for several terrifying seconds. Somewhere distant, someone shouted my name. Ethan, stay with us. I wanted to answer. I could not even open my mouth anymore. My flashlight flickered once beneath the water. Then darkness swallowed everything except a single pale shape above me. The dog. Still waiting. Still refusing to leave. Then something moved behind me in the water. Slow. Massive. Not imagined this time. I felt it before I fully saw it. A deep vibration rolling through the lake beneath my boots. My blood turned cold in a completely different way. Because whatever was down there with me was moving closer. Fear changes shape. When you are close to death, at first, you fear the cold. Then you fear running out of air. But eventually, you fear something else entirely. Being forgotten beneath the ice while the world keeps moving without you. The vibration in the water grew stronger beneath me. Slow, heavy, deliberate. My exhausted brain tried to make sense of it through the haze of hypothermia and panic. Blackwater Lake was deep in some places. More than 80 feet according to old fishing maps. People talked about giant lake trout down there sometimes. Stories told around fireplaces during long winters. But this felt bigger than a fish. The dark shape moved somewhere behind me beyond the reach of my weakening flashlight beam. I twisted awkwardly in the freezing water, my boots dragging through the blackness below. Every movement burned what little energy I had left. For one terrifying second, I saw something pale glide through the darkness beneath me. Large. Smooth. Then gone again. My heart slammed painfully against my ribs. Rationally, I knew cold water and oxygen loss could trigger hallucinations. Survival experts talked about it all the time. Your brain starts inventing things when it cannot process trauma anymore. But it felt real. Too real. Above me, the ice cracked again. Light pierced through in thin, glowing lines across the frozen ceiling overhead. Voices shouted through the storm. We almost got him. Metal struck ice repeatedly now. Fast. Rhythmic. Hope surged through me again, even while terror clawed at the back of my mind from whatever moved beneath me. I pushed upward weakly. My gloved hand finally broke through a small opening no wider than a dinner plate. Freezing air hit my skin like fire. I gasped desperately, sucking in the first real breath I had taken in what felt like hours. It hurt worse than the cold. My lungs seized violently while icy water streamed from my jacket sleeves. "He is alive," someone shouted above me. Hands reached through the opening immediately. Two men lying flat against the ice, stretching toward me while another secured ropes around their waists from farther back. Snow whipped across their coats under the beam of floodlights mounted on a rescue truck near shore. And beside them stood the dog, white fur covered in frost. Blue eyes locked onto me so intensely it almost did not feel animal. He barked nonstop, pacing around the hole while his bleeding paws slipped across the ice. "Easy. We got you," one of the rescuers yelled. I tried lifting my arms higher toward them, but my body barely responded anymore. The freezing water had stolen almost all strength from my muscles. Every movement felt delayed. Heavy. Wrong. Then something brushed against my boot underwater. I froze instantly. My breath caught painfully in my throat. The movement came again. Slow pressure sliding past my leg beneath the black water. Not aggressive. Just there. My flashlight beam flickered weakly downward and illuminated nothing except swirling darkness. But the feeling remained. Something under me. Watching maybe. My chest tightened harder than before. "Pull," someone shouted above. Strong hands grabbed my jacket sleeves and hauled upward while the edges of the ice cracked wider around my shoulders. Pain exploded through my arms as frozen gear scraped against rough ice. I barely felt most of it anymore. The cold had numbed everything below my chest completely. Then the dog suddenly growled. Deep. Sharp. Different from before. Every rescuer paused. The animal stared directly at the dark water behind me through the opening, first standing along his neck beneath the falling snow. He barked violently once, twice, then backed away from the edge. The expression on Sheriff Dale's face changed instantly. "Move him now," he snapped. The rescuers pulled harder. Ice groaned around me while freezing water sucked at my legs below the surface like it did not want to let go. I looked downward one last time into the blackness beneath me, and this time I saw it clearly. Not an animal, not a hallucination. A snowmobile headlight, deep under the water, still glowing faintly beside the machine that had dragged me beneath the lake. My snowmobile had settled almost 20 feet below the surface, but someone was sitting on it, motionless, human-shaped. My blood turned colder than the lake itself. Then the light finally died. There are moments your brain refuses to accept even while they are happening. Seeing someone sitting beneath a frozen lake was one of them. The light from my dying snowmobile headlamp flickered weakly through the dark water below me, barely illuminating the machine resting on the lake floor. But the shape sitting behind the handlebars was unmistakably human. Motionless, watching upward. My exhausted mind struggled to understand what I was seeing while freezing water dragged at my legs. The figure did not move. It just sat there beneath the black water as if it had been waiting for me. Then the headlight finally dimmed completely. Darkness swallowed everything below. "Pull him up now," Sheriff Dale shouted again. Strong hands grabbed beneath my arms while another rescuer secured a rope around my chest. Ice scraped painfully against my jacket and shoulders as they dragged me upward through the narrow opening. Every breath burned. My body shook uncontrollably the second more of me cleared the water. The wind above the lake felt almost worse than the freezing water itself. "Easy, easy," someone kept saying near my ear. "You are okay. We got you." But I was not okay. My eyes locked back onto the dark opening in the ice while they pulled me farther onto the frozen surface. I expected to see the figure again, some impossible face staring upward from beneath the lake. Instead, there was only darkness, empty black water swirling below cracked ice. The dog pushed toward me immediately, white fur covered in snow and ice crystals. His body pressed against my side while he barked softly now instead of wildly. Up close, I could see blood smeared across his front paws from digging through the ice for so long. "That dog saved your life," one of the rescuers muttered while wrapping thermal blankets around my shoulders. I tried speaking. My jaw barely worked. My voice cracked painfully. "Someone under there." Sheriff Dale crouched beside me instantly. Mid-50s maybe. Thick gray beard covered in snow. "Easy, son. Do not talk yet." I saw someone. My teeth chattered violently between every word. Under the water. The sheriff exchanged a quick look with the other rescuers. Not disbelief. Exactly. Something stranger. Unease maybe. The dog suddenly growled again beside me. Low and tense. Everyone looked back toward the hole in the ice at the same time. Nothing appeared. No movement. No sound except wind sweeping across the lake surface. Still, nobody moved closer to the opening. Sheriff Dale tightened his grip on my shoulder. Get him to the truck, he ordered quietly. They half-carried me across the frozen lake toward the rescue vehicle parked near shore. My boots barely worked beneath me. Every muscle in my body cramped violently as circulation slowly returned. Pain flooded back into my fingers first, then my legs. Sharp, brutal, but strangely comforting too because pain meant I was still alive. The dog never left my side the entire walk. Even when rescuers tried guiding him away from the truck, he stayed close enough that his fur brushed against my frozen gloves. Inside the heated cab, warm air blasted across my face while paramedics checked my pulse and wrapped heated packs around my hands. One woman kept shining a flashlight into my eyes every 30 seconds. Stay awake for me, Ethan, she said gently. You have been underwater a long time. I nodded weakly, but my attention stayed fixed on the lake through the fog truck windows. Snow continued blowing across the frozen surface under flashing emergency lights. Small figures moved near the rescue hole while more vehicles arrived from town. Search crews probably. Looking for my snowmobile maybe. Or whoever I saw beneath the water. You said there was someone else down there? The paramedic asked quietly while checking my temperature monitor. Yes. My voice sounded raw now. Sitting on the snowmobile. Silence filled the truck for 2 full seconds. The sheriff climbed inside then, shutting the door hard against the wind behind him. Snow dusted his heavy coat and beard. He looked older suddenly. More tired. Ethan, he said carefully. How long have you lived near Blackwater? About 6 years. He nodded once. Slow. Thoughtful. Then his eyes shifted toward the dog curled beside my boots on the truck floor. Did anyone ever tell you why folks around here call that animal Ghost? The dog lifted his head slightly at the sound of his name. Sheriff Dale stared at him for another long moment before speaking again. Because 4 winters ago, that same dog tried digging someone else out of this lake. The heater inside the rescue truck blasted against my frozen skin hard enough to hurt. Pain spread slowly through my fingers and toes in sharp waves while paramedics continued wrapping heated blankets around me. I should have felt relieved, safe, grateful just to be breathing again. Instead, one thought kept circling through my exhausted mind like a storm refusing to move on. Someone was under that lake with me. Sheriff Dale sat across from me in silence for a while after mentioning the dog's name. Ghost lay curled beside my boots on the truck floor, breathing heavily, but finally calm now that I was out of the water. Up close, he looked older than I first realized. Gray streaks ran through the thick, white fur around his muzzle. One ear carried an old tear near the tip. His paws looked raw from clawing against the ice for hours. I reached down carefully and touched the top of his head. He immediately leaned into my hand like he had known me forever. 4 winters ago, Sheriff Dale said quietly, staring out the frosted truck window toward the lake. A man named Caleb Turner disappeared out there during a storm. The name meant nothing to me. I shook uncontrollably beneath the blankets while listening. Tour guide. Lived alone in a cabin north of town. Good man by all accounts. The sheriff paused briefly. Ghost belonged to him. The dog lifted his head slightly at the sound of Caleb's name. Search crews found Caleb's snowmobile beneath the ice 3 days later, Dale continued. But they never found him. A strange heaviness settled in the truck after those words. Even the paramedics nearby stopped talking for a second. My eyes drifted back toward the frozen lake outside. Snow still swept violently across the surface beneath rotating emergency lights. Somewhere out there, divers were preparing equipment to recover my machine once daylight came. The thought made my stomach tighten instantly, because I knew what I saw beneath the water. The figure, I whispered hoarsely. You think it was him? Sheriff Dale looked at me carefully for a long moment before answering. I think hypothermia does strange things to people. But he did not sound convinced. Not fully. The truck fell quiet again except for the low hum of the heater. Then Ghost suddenly stood up. Every muscle in his body tightened at once. A low growl rolled from his chest while he stared toward the back window facing the lake. The sheriff noticed immediately. "What is it, boy?" Ghost barked sharply once. Then again. The sound echoed strangely inside the truck. Outside, one of the rescue workers near the lake started waving his flashlight wildly toward shore. Another man stumbled backward away from the opening in the ice. "What happened?" the paramedic asked. Sheriff Dale opened the truck door instantly. Freezing wind exploded inside around us. Voices shouted across the lake through the storm. Ghost jumped from the truck before anyone could stop him and sprinted back across the snow toward the rescue site. "Stay here," the sheriff ordered me. Then he ran after the others. I tried staying put for maybe 10 seconds. Then curiosity and fear dragged me forward harder than exhaustion. I pushed myself out of the truck unsteadily, thermal blanket hanging around my shoulders while freezing wind sliced through my damp clothes immediately. My legs barely worked right. Every step across the snow felt weak and unstable, but I kept moving toward the crowd gathering near the opening in the ice. Ghost stood at the edge barking furiously again. Rescue workers circled around the hole with flashlights pointed downward into the dark water below. Nobody spoke at first when I reached them. Their faces told me enough already. Uneasy. Pale. One of the divers slowly looked toward Sheriff Dale. "You need to see this." The diver aimed his flashlight downward through the broken ice. I stepped closer carefully despite every instinct telling me not to. The water below rippled softly beneath floating ice chunks. At first I saw nothing except darkness reflecting flashlight beams. Then the movement started. Slow. Rising upward from beneath the lake. A pale face appeared just below the surface. Human. Eyes open. Looking directly up at us from under the ice. Every person standing around that hole in the ice stopped breathing at the same time. The face beneath the water looked almost unreal under the flashlight beams. Pale skin. Dark eyes open wide beneath the surface. Motionless except for the slow drifting movement caused by the current under the lake. My exhausted brain refused to process what I was seeing. Because the face looked alive. Not trapped. Not frozen. Watching. Ghost barked violently beside the opening, claws scraping against the ice again, while several rescuers stepped backward instinctively. One diver muttered something under his breath I could not hear over the wind. Sheriff Dale crouched slowly near the edge, flashlight trembling slightly in his hand now. "Everybody back up," he said quietly. Nobody argued. The figure beneath the water remained perfectly still for another long second. Then the lake current shifted again, and the face drifted sideways beneath floating ice. My heart nearly stopped when I realized why the features looked familiar. The person underwater was wearing a black snowmobile helmet with the visor cracked open. One exactly like mine. "That is my reflection," I whispered. Relief hit the group almost immediately after the words left my mouth. Nervous laughter broke out from one of the rescue workers, while another exhaled loudly beside me. The ice and dark water had reflected my face downward through the opening at the perfect angle. Nothing supernatural. Nothing impossible. Just fear mixed with exhaustion and shadows. But Sheriff Dale did not look relieved. He kept staring into the water beneath the ice longer than everyone else. Ghost did too. The dog's growling never stopped. "Sheriff?" one diver asked quietly. Dale blinked once like he had been somewhere far away. "Get everybody off the lake," he ordered suddenly. "Storm is getting worse." Snow whipped harder around us now, reducing visibility almost down to nothing. The wind screamed across Blackwater Lake in long hollow gusts that sounded almost human sometimes. The kind of sound that crawls under your skin when you are already scared. Rescue workers began packing equipment quickly while paramedics tried guiding me back toward the truck again. My legs finally gave out halfway there. Strong hands caught me before I collapsed fully into the snow. "Easy," the female paramedic said. "Your core temperature is still dangerously low." I nodded weakly, too exhausted to argue anymore. Ghost followed beside us without hesitation, limping slightly now from his torn paws. Inside the truck, the heater blasted hot air hard enough to fog every window completely. My entire body shook uncontrollably beneath fresh blankets while the paramedic checked my pulse again. "You should be unconscious by now after exposure like that," she muttered softly. "You are lucky." Lucky. The word felt strange after everything that happened. Most people who fell through lake ice during Alaskan winters did not make it out alive. I knew that better than anyone. I had photographed enough memorial services in small northern towns over the years to understand how quickly nature could erase people. Yet somehow I was still breathing because one stubborn dog refused to stop digging. Ghost rested his head directly against my knee while snow hammered against the truck roof overhead. I reached down slowly and scratched behind his ear. "Good boy," I whispered. His tail thumped weakly once against the floor. Sheriff Dale climbed into the truck a few minutes later, looking more unsettled than before. Snow covered his shoulders completely now. "Roads are closing," he said to the paramedics. "We are taking him to the ranger station until weather clears." Nobody disagreed. The storm outside had become brutal. Wind strong enough to shake the entire truck every few seconds. As the vehicle finally pulled away from the lake, I glanced back through the rear window one last time. Emergency lights flashed faintly across the frozen surface, while drifting snow slowly buried the rescue site behind us. Then I saw something that made my stomach tighten all over again. A single figure stood alone near the hole in the ice after everyone else had already left. Tall, motionless, barely visible through the storm. Watching the truck drive away, I leaned forward sharply against the seat. "Stop." The paramedic looked over immediately. "What?" I pointed through the rear window with shaking fingers. "Someone is still out there." Everyone turned to look. But the lake behind us was empty now except for blowing snow and darkness. Ghost suddenly lifted his head beside me and stared toward the back window again. Then, very softly, he whimpered. "The human mind will invent explanations for things it cannot accept. Exhaustion, trauma, hypothermia." I repeated those words silently to myself the entire drive to the ranger station while snow hammered against the truck hard enough to rattle the doors. Because the alternative was harder to live with. The alternative meant I really had seen someone standing alone on Blackwater Lake after everyone else had left. Ghost stayed pressed against my leg during the drive, unusually quiet now except for the occasional soft whine whenever the truck hit rough patches in the snow-covered road. Outside, Alaska disappeared beneath white chaos. Trees blurred past in the storm like dark shadows underwater. Sheriff Dale sat in the passenger seat, staring ahead without speaking much. The silence inside the truck felt heavier than before, like everyone was trying not to say certain thoughts out loud. The ranger station sat about 5 miles north of town near the forest line. Small, old, built mostly from dark cedar logs weathered by decades of brutal winters. Warm yellow light glowed through the windows when we arrived, and for the first time all night, relief loosened something tight inside my chest. Survival changes your priorities fast. At that moment, dry clothes and heat felt more valuable than anything else on earth. The second I stepped inside, warmth wrapped around me hard enough to sting. A fire crackled inside a large stone fireplace, while 2 exhausted rangers looked up from a table covered in storm maps and radios. One woman immediately hurried toward me carrying towels and dry blankets. "You are the lake guy," she said softly. "We heard the call." I nodded weakly. My teeth still would not stop chattering completely. Ghost followed me inside slowly, limping worse now under the bright lights. The female ranger crouched instantly when she noticed his injured paws. "Oh, buddy," she whispered. Ghost allowed her to examine him without resistance, but his pale blue eyes never drifted far from me for long. Almost like he was making sure I stayed alive too. They gave me dry thermal clothes from an emergency locker while Sheriff Dale brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I sat near the fireplace wrapped in blankets, staring into the flames while warmth painfully returned to my frozen hands. Every nerve ending felt raw, alive, real, which somehow made the memories from the lake feel even less believable. "You should sleep once your temperature stabilizes," the paramedic told me after another examination. "Your body has been through severe trauma tonight." Sleep. The idea sounded impossible after everything I had seen beneath that ice. Sheriff Dale finally sat across from me holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "There is something else you should know about Caleb Turner," he said quietly. Ghost immediately lifted his head from the rug near the fireplace at the sound of the name. After he disappeared 4 years ago, people around town started reporting strange things out near Blackwater. I looked up slowly. Dale rubbed one tired hand across his beard before continuing. Lights moving beneath the ice during storms. Footprints appearing on the lake when nobody had been out there. Ghost barking at empty shorelines for hours. One of the rangers near the radio gave an uncomfortable glance toward us, but stayed silent. "You believe that?" I asked carefully. The sheriff held my gaze for a long moment. I believe grief does strange things to isolated towns. Not exactly an answer. Wind screamed outside the station windows hard enough to shake the glass. Somewhere deeper in the building, an old pipe groaned loudly. Ghost suddenly stood up from the rug near the fire. Every muscle in his body tightened again exactly the same way it had at the lake. A low growl rolled from his chest. The room went completely silent. "What is it?" the female ranger whispered. Ghost stared toward the front door of the station without blinking. Then came the sound. 3 slow knocks. Everyone froze. Instantly. Not because someone knocked. Because nobody should have been out there. The storm outside had become nearly impossible to travel through safely. Sheriff Dale stood carefully and reached for the flashlight hanging beside the door. "Probably another ranger," one man muttered uncertainly. But nobody sounded convinced. The knocking came again. Slower this time. Ghost barked sharply once. Dale opened the door carefully against the screaming wind outside. Snow blasted into the station immediately. Darkness stretched beyond the porch beneath swirling white storm clouds. Empty. Nobody stood there. Then the sheriff looked downward toward the wooden porch floor. And his face changed completely. "No," he whispered softly. I pushed myself up from the chair despite exhaustion and crossed the room carefully. There, half covered in fresh snow beneath the porch light, stood a single pair of wet boot prints leading to the door from the storm outside. Only one problem. There were no footprints leading away. There is something deeply wrong about footprints that appear from nowhere. Every person standing near that ranger station door understood it instantly. The wet boot prints stopped directly at the entrance beneath the porch light. Fresh snow continued falling around them in thick white sheets, but no tracks led back into the storm. Nothing approached from the woods. Nothing crossed the parking lot. Just footprints ending at our door like someone had stepped out of the darkness itself. Ghost barked once sharply behind me. Not aggressive this time. Almost anxious. Sheriff Dale slowly crouched near the prints while cold wind swept snow across the porch boards. "Close the door," one of the rangers whispered behind us. Nobody moved immediately. I stared at the footprints, exhaustion making the entire moment feel unreal. Then I noticed something else. The left boot print dragged slightly deeper than the right. Uneven weight distribution, like the person had once injured their leg. Sheriff Dale saw it too. His expression tightened instantly. "Caleb walked with a limp after a snowmobile accident," he said quietly. Silence swallowed the room behind us. The female ranger crossed herself quickly before looking away. Dale finally stood and shut the door hard against the storm outside. The lock clicked into place louder than it should have. "Nobody leaves tonight," he said firmly. Storm or no storm. Nobody argued after that. The ranger station settled into uneasy silence over the next hour. Radios crackled occasionally with weather updates while wind battered the building hard enough to shake old window frames. I sat near the fireplace wrapped in blankets, trying to process everything that had happened since falling through the ice. None of it felt real anymore. The lake, the figure underwater, the footprints, my own survival. Ghost remained beside me the entire time. Every so often he would lift his head suddenly toward the windows like he heard something the rest of us could not. Around 3 in the morning, exhaustion finally started pulling me under harder than fear. My body hurt everywhere now that warmth had returned fully. Every muscle ached from the cold and struggle beneath the lake. I must have drifted asleep for a while beside the fire because the next thing I remember was Ghost growling softly near my chair. My eyes opened slowly. The ranger station had gone quiet. Too quiet. The fire burned low now, casting long orange shadows across the wooden walls. Most of the others slept in chairs or along nearby benches beneath emergency blankets. Ghost stood facing the hallway leading deeper into the station, completely still. His pale blue eyes locked on something I could not see. Then came the sound. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. One step at a time somewhere beyond the dark hallway. Every hair on my arm stood up instantly. Ghost barked sharply. Sheriff Dale woke immediately, hand reaching for the flashlight beside his chair. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Another step echoed through the station. Closer this time. The sheriff stood slowly while the others woke in confusion around us. Nobody spoke loudly anymore. The entire building felt frozen in place listening to those footsteps move through the darkness beyond the hallway. Then the old radio near the maps crackled violently to life by itself. Static exploded through the room, hard enough to make everyone jump. A distorted voice pushed through the noise for half a second. Lake. The signal cut out immediately afterward. Ghost sprinted toward the hallway before anyone could stop him. Ghost! Dale shouted, grabbing his flashlight. We followed quickly despite every instinct telling us not to. The hallway led toward storage rooms and an emergency exit at the back of the station. Old wooden floors creaked beneath our boots, while flashlight beams cut through darkness ahead. Ghost stopped near the